why do we talk about vulnerability so much, and why do we think it's so important that we really led off this series? Well, what happens when we are not able to get on the healthy side of vulnerability, and that is that, we acknowledge it's there, we feel it, but we want to respond to it in a way where it doesn't let us control us, right? So I really look at three main areas that if we don't allow ourselves to walk through the fear of the vulnerability, it ends up harming us, okay? So the first one is that if we can't allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we end up feeling interpersonally alone.
Yep.
Okay?
You can have a ton of people around you.
Yes.
But if there isn't a vulnerable interpersonal connection with those people or that person, you can feel like you're the only one in the room.
Yeah. And that aloneness so opens the door for you to have that relationship that Dr. Ashley was talking about with food, because we all need a relationship. If we're not able to risk to be vulnerable with other individuals, we're gonna end up filling that need with food, okay?
Yeah.
So the first difficulty would be that interpersonal aloneness.
And we hear aloneness as a trigger for overeating all the time. I mean, it's one of the most common emotional experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, regardless of how many people are in your life, right? I think the other thing that happens is that oftentimes, depending on a history that we're going to go into, there can be a feeling of shame, okay? So I don't feel good about myself, my real self, so I'm going to hide it from others, okay? I'm actually going to approach life and others with what's called a false self versus a real self presentation, right? And so that shame gets hidden within myself. I never allow it to get exposed to anybody else, right? And then guess what? It doesn't get challenged in any positive way, right? You still feel like I have these parts of myself that are shameful. You hide them, so you never have any experience that might say, hey, actually these parts are actually okay and lovable.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
So the more we steer clear of vulnerability, the more we continue to hold shame within ourselves. It never has a chance to heal.
And we take it as truth, right? I mean, we take this idea and maybe this past experience of judgment as truth, that if I was judged for X, Y, and Z, that means X, Y, and Z really is bad. Therefore, I am bad. So if we don't risk to put those vulnerable parts of ourselves out there with safe others, so we'll talk about that too, because that's key, then we never get that experience where it's like, well, maybe those original judgmental experiences aren't true. Maybe those parts of myself really are okay.
Right. Exactly. And you're really talking about then what I see as that third component, and that is self-worth. Okay. So we get self-worth in two ways. Number one, within ourselves, but we also get self-worth by sharing our real self with others. And when they embrace us, warts and all. Okay, not just the good parts that you put out there, because someone can embrace that and you're like, oh yeah, but if they really saw the real me, then they would not like me. So when we risk to say, I'm going to tell you about something that is really bad about me, and that person says, I love you anyways, okay, it helps us to create self-worth. But if we are not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, it just never happens. And so we hold these truths about ourselves that are very likely not true, and they stay unhealed, okay, unmended, and then it just perpetuates that interpersonal aloneness.
Right, and then you just need, food or other coping mechanisms as well to just constantly kind of keep all of that shame and sense of badness and not good enoughness kind of shoved down.
Yeah.
So in the workshops, we talk about, using food to like literally like shove it all back down inside, because God forbid you let those fears come out. It feels too dangerous and risky. Because you've had experiences before where it was dangerous and it was risky.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's talk about how does this get created? Again, we all have normal vulnerability, but I think what we're talking about goes into the area of kind of excessive vulnerability, and usually from a past history of very early experiences of showing that tender, vulnerable part of yourself and having it be responded to in a way that was less than ideal. Okay.
Yeah, I think as infants, and any of you who have been around babies, that babies are born incredibly vulnerable, right? They don't know to hide parts of themselves. So if you've been around toddlers and young children, they think they are like the bee's knees, and they don't hide any parts of themselves. And it's not until, they start to have experiences, and they don't all have to be negative, horrible experiences, but they just have these interpersonal experiences where they learn that the recipient of their vulnerable self has some type of judgment or invalidation or rejection of that part. And so children very early on, when they're in those experiences, learn like, oh, I need to hide that part of myself, and instead kind of bring a representative forward and show a part that, is more capable or smarter or more mature.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of different scenarios, because, we're always talking about, for the most part, parents certainly don't try to create this. There's all sorts of different ways that shame and that, excessive kind of fear of vulnerability can be created. And, so let's talk, first of all, sometimes there can be different temperaments in a family, right? So there can be somebody that's very boisterous and very, kind of out there. And maybe, there's an introverted parent, right? And it's like, oh, you're too loud. Please stop that, right? And so that child kind of takes that in, like, wow, like whenever I'm this way, I'm like happy and just like my natural self. Yeah, something's wrong with me. Okay, and look at Dr. Ashley's face. That's exactly so that's what happens, because really parents are a child's first mirror of themselves and their self-worth. So they come out with, this is just who I naturally am. And if people respond like, yay, you, then they're like, yay, me. But if it's like, oh my gosh, like, please stop that. There's like, oh, like, what is it about me? Okay. And so you start tempering yourself.
Yes.
Right?
So kids are very egocentric thinkers, which means that whatever happens and however you respond is because of them, right? So the world revolves around them as it should at that age. And sometimes that can be a good thing that they're very egocentric, but in this case, it can be not a good thing, because if their adult or whoever they're interacting with does provide some type of minimizing or invalidating response, unfortunately, what our child brain does with that is it says, okay, I'm responsible for that reaction, right? It's about me. Something must be wrong with me that they're responding that way, right? And there we see the beginning of shame.
So let's even talk just about a couple more. Think about it like if a young child want something, like they've seen a commercial and they're going to school for the first time and they want these really super nice but expensive sneakers, right? And their mom's like, oh, like, I don't think I can afford that. I'm so stressed. I can't work anymore, right? And so that child starts learning like, wow, this like natural want or need created mom to be stressed. It's not okay to have
I don't want to do that to mom, so I'm gonna
exactly. Okay, so kind of fast forward in real life, and so if you have a want or a need, let's say around like money or a material item, you might think, oh, I'm bad. That's so bad. I shouldn't want this. Right. I'm so selfish.
I have such a blessed life. I shouldn't be wanting more.
So you don't share kind of some of those wants or needs with others because you don't want to hurt them or make them feel more stressed. See how this kind of gets like entangled in these ways that, you know, we would never really think until we start exploring, right? But these are all aspects of vulnerability, like just coming forward with your natural, spontaneous self, and then seeing how the world around you responds. And if there is a negative, how then we internalize it and we carry it forward.
Yeah, and again, I just want to reiterate what I said last time, that as we talk about, you know, looking at the past and how this gets created, I mean, oftentimes we draw from examples with our parents because they are the most influential people in our lives when we're little. So, I mean, that's very normal and appropriate. But as we talk about this, again, this is in no way knocking parents. We're not saying that, you know, if your parent didn't in a loving way, that they had any kind of malicious intent or they were wanting to create shame. I mean, there certainly are cases where maybe that is true, but you know, most of the time what we're working with are just experiences where you have an adult perspective on something, like a mom, you know, calculating how much those brand new shoes are, with a child who has a different perspective, right? A very innocent need. Maybe they're thinking about fitting in with their friends. And it's those two perspectives that clash. And then you have an egocentric child who takes on so much responsibility for why the person responded that way. So it's just important that we continue to reiterate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And last week in the Deeper Work VideoCast, we talked about the highly sensitive. So it's these kinds of situations, just like Dr. Ashley just mentioned. And then if you take that in through a highly sensitive temperament, so we've got an egocentric developmental phase. We've got between primary attachment figures, like in this example we're talking about, parents that we all want, like we look to our parents, like, you know, what do you think of us? How do you respond to me, right? And then if you have a highly sensitive temperament, you take that in, and kids don't have the critical thinking ability to be able to express this and talk about this. All they do is they take this in within themselves.
They don't even know that they're doing it.
Exactly. I'm too much. I can't need this. When I do this, mom gets stressed or dad gets angry. So I have to temper parts of myself, and that's all an unconscious process.
And it's really in the spirit of keeping the peace, keeping harmony in the relationship. It's just a natural tendency for humans to do that. So it makes sense why we all do this as children.
I'm going to give one other example, because we talk so much about that, the primary, when the template is created in the family of origin, but it's not just the primary, right? As we get older and we have experiences like at school and with peers, it's the same thing. So it might be a kid that's super smart, right? And loves being super smart and raises their hand and asks questions and usually gets really good grades, and then starts getting kind of bullied, right? Or ridiculed for being smart, okay? So that part then of yourself starts getting hidden. Like, I can't let people know that I'm smart or that I'm interested in these things. And maybe even I have to like pretend that I'm interested in something else, right? Like basketball or whatever, because this real part of myself, when I risk it, then it gets a negative feedback.
And it's painful. That negative feedback is really painful, and who doesn't want to avoid pain? So we come up with really crafty ways to hide those parts of ourselves.
Exactly. So we're talking about, again, normal vulnerability, then some experiences of excessive vulnerability. Then we do have this other level, which is shame, okay? So when experiences then are created that says, oh, there's something wrong with me, okay? And that's another layer of then hiding yourself, okay? That then in the here and now, it ends up being this experience of feeling kind of with others, but alone within yourself. And then certainly when you have normal feelings and vulnerabilities that come up throughout life, this feeling like I can't let anyone know these things,
Right.
because then it's going to be worse, because then they're going to see how ridiculous I am. They might judge me. I have to hide this. But then we all have to cope. And if your tendency is then to cope through food, man, that mint chocolate chip ice cream tastes really, really good and fits a need.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would add to that as well that, guilt and shame are very sister emotions, if you will, and they're a slippery slope. So guilt is this sense of I've done something bad, and shame is the sense of I am bad. And, again, if we go back to kind of where this gets created, we know that most people affected by emotional and binge eating identify with this highly sensitive temperament. Dr. Julie and I may or may not be off the charts as well. I don't know. We totally are.
It's a good thing.
It's a wonderful thing. I almost just fell off my stool. It's a wonderful thing. But when you experience yourself with that emotional intensity and you're a kiddo going through life learning, we have to learn vis-a-vis making mistakes, right? And so we feel that very appropriate guilt if maybe we messed up, maybe we say something not nice to our friend, or we do something we're not supposed to do. That's how kids learn. But, again, if we get a response that is judgmental or critical, and you pair that with this highly sensitive temperament where you just go inward so deeply, that guilt that might be appropriate around you, maybe your behavior wasn't the best, can very quickly escalate into shame of not only have I done something wrong or bad, but I just am bad. My human is bad.
Yes. And I have to hide that. Okay.
To keep people around to some degree.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To keep people around, to get love.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some attention.
So I hide these really real parts of myself, right? And my interpretation of these parts of myself, okay? And I don't allow any interpersonal, what we call emotional intimacy, okay? And then again, it sets it up for vulnerability with food. So we hide ourselves from others, and we end up hiding out with food, okay? Because we all need to feel better. And in an ideal, healthy situation, we would be able to reach out to others to help us during times of difficulty.
Right.
Okay, that's that interpersonal, and then we would also be able to reach in within ourselves for the intrapersonal. Okay, but when this vulnerability is there and it's been met with these negative experiences, that hiding of yourself occurs. And then it just becomes this cycle.
Vicious
cycle.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So that's why we had to start out. And in both the Recovery Hacks video series that Dr. Ashley's doing and in my Mission Mondays, you'll see that repeatedly we have been talking about sharing meaningful parts of yourself with others in this community. We have talked in our descriptions of this community, emotionally safe, judgment-free zone, okay? Because we want there to be a reparative experience where you can allow yourself to progressively become vulnerable in a healthy way and be seen and have that be met, okay, by other people in the community, in a positive way. Because that's what happens is when we allow ourselves to be seen, we open the door for reciprocity, okay?
Yeah.
We learn, this is the beautiful thing, that we're not the only one that's scared to death.
That's right. Yes. Brene Brown talks about common humanity, that we all actually fear the same things and we question ourselves in the same way. We all walk around wondering if we're good enough.
And we do the same shameful behaviors. Yeah. We all have the same tendencies to need to cope, right? But if we only keep this within ourselves, we only have that experience of intrapersonal shame. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I do this. This is awful, right? Yep. But when we risk to share it in a real way with others, and they say, first of all, hey, that's okay. And second of all, guess what? I do this, right?
Yeah.
Then it reduces that sense of shame. And then when we get that acceptance from other people, it makes us feel like, hey, maybe myself is actually worthy and worthy of love.
Yes. Well, yeah. So these relationships then can become a new mirror.
Yes.
So you talked about how like
absolutely.
our, maybe our parents and other people in our early life are our first mirrors. Well, they don't have to be our only mirrors.
Goodness.
Right? So we can have these new relationships in our life today that can become mirrors that, when we do risk to show, we can trust that that relationship will hold us and will love us through all of our wars.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
You got it. You got it. And we will call this over and over again, reparative experiences. So again, in our first VideoCast, we talk about, the template and how that gets created. Well, we talked about some pieces of it. We're certainly going to go through.
Keep going over it.
Through more of that. Thank goodness, right? It's not done and over with in those early years. That Dr. Ashley is absolutely right. Like, thankfully, there's other people that can be these mirrors. There's other people that can be these healthy attachment figures that are maybe better equipped to embrace us. Maybe they're more able to love and to embrace us, or maybe we're able to use words in a different way than when we were young to ask now for what we need instead of not being able to communicate that so readily when we're young. So we have to risk vulnerability. It's the kind of like vulnerability of being re-wounded, right? So the only way that we can heal from past wounds is to actually risk to open up in the same area of vulnerability and actually to risk to be re-wounded, okay? But have that be met with not being re-wounded, actually being loved, embraced, valued, and supported. And that's what we call a reparative experience. That, again, can only be had by risking the vulnerable.
Right. You got to step into that scary territory. And I think therapy is a place where we, really help people kind of learn how to do that, but then also evaluate, who is in your life that has the potential to be that safe other for you, because we don't want you to venture into, relationships that do have some very critical or judgmental dynamics and then kind of bring this really tender, real self forward. And then once again, get slammed with rejection and criticism. So really being able to find, I guess we're talking about this last piece of how do you create this change, but, really looking for those safe others in your life, people who are tenderhearted and can receive you.
Yeah. So how do we know if they're safe? Let's talk about that.
Yes, let's talk about that. Who are emotionally safe people? How do you find them?
So I think that the first thing is to accept the risk, okay? And that's hard, but I'm always going to be honest with you, right? So I tell everyone in my life that I will always be honest so you can trust what I say. So it's going to be a risk, right? And not everybody is going to be this positive reparative figure. We want to definitely do this in a deliberate way, right? So we want to test the waters to see if someone seems to be trustworthy, but then we do have to step through the vulnerability, right? To risk again to be seen.
Sure.
Okay. So what are some ways? So when I'm trying to decide if somebody is a safe person, first of all, I give it time, right? You don't like meet somebody and then like open up your whole heart to them because you just don't know if they're a safe person. And I always listen. Okay. So I actually listen to what they say about other people, right? Are they accepting and kind in their language about other people? Are they telling me secrets that they shouldn't be telling me about somebody else? And I'm like, okay, like I can like value you for another thing, but you're not going to be one of those safe people because you're violating somebody else's trust. And I certainly don't want you to violate mine.
Right. If you're going to talk that way about them, how would you talk about me when I'm not in the room?
Yeah. So giving it time, listening to how they interact with other people and what they're saying to you. What would be another one?
I just blinked when you said that.
Oh, so. Okay. So give me a minute.
What would be another one? Well, I guess I would reveal little pieces of myself. So I think of it kind of like that dating process of, it's like you go on the coffee date, you see how that goes, and then you go on the lunch date and see how that goes, and then the dinner date. So, I mean, the same is true with friendships and other relationships. You reveal a little piece of yourself and you see how that person responds. So it's a little bit of a risk, but it's a pretty, small risk, if you will. So if they don't respond well, it's not like your whole world is going to be shattered. But if they do respond well, then it can give you that trust and safety to do a little bit more and a little bit more. So I guess it's a repeat of what you're saying about it does take time.
Yeah, and it should take time.
And it should.
And it really should take time, right? So I think another piece I'll add to that is reciprocity. Okay. So if you share a little bit about yourself, something that feels vulnerable, but not like really big, right? And then in a healthy relationship, they're going to also share a little bit. Right. Okay. So then you're kind of at that same level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay?
And that creates a lot of safety. Brene Brown talks about that. Like if you share a little bit of your vulnerability, you actually give the person that you're with permission to share a little bit of their vulnerability. And then what happens is you start to do this really beautiful positive cycle of reciprocity. Yes. It's kind of like this ping pong game of I'll share a little bit, you share a little bit, I'll share a little bit more, you share a little bit more.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, I'll refer back to the Mission Monday because I really am kind of talking about all these concepts when I give you that little nudge of encouragement. But in response to some of the profiles that people wrote, I had said like, wow, it really makes me feel like I've been invited in, right? So when we engage in this kind of a relationship where you're risking to share a little bit, it makes the other person feel like, wow, I can come in. And then usually they're going to share a little bit about themselves. Whereas if you have a guarded relationship, then the other person's going to be guarded, okay? And you might know each other for 3 years, but it's been this mutually guarded relationship because no one has risked to take it to that deeper level.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So you have to, in this process, kind of observe yourself, right? How am I approaching this situation? Am I giving someone a chance to get to know me a little bit so that I can see what they do with it so they can feel a little bit closer and then they can come in more towards me as well.
Yeah, and when you say give the person an opportunity to get to know me, it's also the opportunity to get to know the things that I don't feel super secure about.
Right.
Like I know for me, one of my like shame spots is that I should know this. And that goes way back for me of having, some really difficult, painful experiences around not knowing better. And so that can really show up in my relationships where it can be really hard for me to show that I don't know because what are they going to think about me? Are they going to think I'm not smart, or are they going to reject me, or are they, I don't know, our brain comes up with all kinds of things. And so where was I even going with that?
I don't know, but since you opened the door, can I step through?
Yes,
okay, so
please.
So this is an incredible relationship that we have developed over time, which has been so beautiful.
11 years.
Yeah, 11 years. And it's been so healing and so reparative, I think, on both of our parts and our histories. And
she's one of my people.
Oh, and she's one of my people.
And I don't have many people, and she's one of them. So.
And it's been because of trust. So I remember when you shared that with me. We were on our retreat.
Yes, I remember right where I was sitting.
Man, and it was so tender. And it was so beautiful. And I just wanted to hold that with so much tenderness. And I knew that about you. And so, I think probably you shared that in response to my sharing, because I think I had started sharing some vulnerable stuff first. And so I don't think I shared back in response to that, but it just made me feel so close to you. And I just, obviously never judged. It was always just like so tender. And like, it just makes me feel like I know you at that deeper level. And I know then how to be able to embrace you in ways that are even more important for you, which is what's in my heart and my intent.
Yes. And I feel that all the time. And the safety that, this relationship has given my little girl inside, has calmed my system down. And so I can actually show up in more of these, need to know spaces. I mean, even doing a video cast where we're here presenting information. I mean, for me, in that little girl part, that feels like she has to, have all of the answers, I guess, or no, can be very vulnerable. But I guarantee you that no matter what happens in this video cast, and no matter how foolish I sound, and I can stumble over words very easily, I love to mix up my words, I know that afterwards, this gal, she'll be honest with me, but it will be with compassion and kindness, and there will never, ever be judgment from you. And so it's really safe for me to show up and take this risk and try and go us. We're in the arena doing it.
Absolutely.
But it's safe because I've got her by my side, and it's really healed that little girl part of me that felt like, I should have known. So thank you for that gift.
You're welcome. And what I say to her all the time is, I think you're absolutely amazing. I didn't even notice if you did stumble.
I'm really good at it.
Well, I never even know because you are so intelligent and your heart is so absolutely fantastic, and you're just an absolutely amazing human being and professional. Like, I'm just so honored that you're sitting next to me and we're doing this together.
Well, our friendship has taught me a lot, and you've guided me a lot in that, because you are an amazing human being.
No.
Are you loving our love fest right now?
But we so did not plan this.
No, but this is real, and this is what authenticity and vulnerability can do for the human spirit, right? So, thanks for being one of my people.
Okay, so I'm going to be really vulnerable because she shared, and I feel like I really need to share. So I felt, I love you, but I felt so uncomfortable when you said that, because as you know, my vulnerability, I think I shared a little bit of this kind of maybe in my first Mission Monday, but my vulnerability is, just don't feel too good about yourself, right? Because if you feel too good about yourself, then that, came back at me in a really negative way, right? Like you're, conceited, or you're this or you're that and everything, which is not in my
that's not your spirit
character whatsoever, and it was just mortifying. So I still get a little bit of anxiety with that positive, and you know that about me. So this is completely unplanned vulnerability.
And my experience of you is you are this amazing person, and I celebrate all that you do for others and do for me. And I mean, you bring so much goodness to the world, and I celebrate that, and I want you to celebrate that. And I know that it touches that raw spot inside of you, because there was a time it wasn't safe to celebrate yourself.
Oh my God.
So we celebrate this woman, don't we?
Oh my
Third
gosh.
hug.
Okay. That's too much. That's too much. Okay. All right, guy.
Okay,
whoa.
wow.
So that was that. Oh my God.
How's that for vulnerability? Does anybody want to leave a comment about what that was like? We're just being us.
We are just being
us.
us.
It's so good.
Which is what we decided at the beginning of this project, that we wanted to lead by example. And so that's what we're doing. And you know what? We're proud of what we're doing.
That's right.
And celebrate each other.
Doing it.
Celebrate each other all the time. So that's pretty amazing. Wow. Okay. So what we're hoping, we could never get to this level without a lot of risking over time, reciprocity, and complete safety. Okay. I have handed my heart to her, and she did not stomp on it, and you've handed your heart to me, and I have not stomped on it over and over and over again, risking little piece by little piece, stepping back and saying, what is this person going to do with it? That's okay. That's not a bad thing to test someone in that way. It's healthy, actually, because you want to be protective of yourself, but you want that to be permeable, right? So you want there to be a healthy boundary, but you don't want it to be a rigid boundary. Okay. So you test the waters over time, share a little bit, see what the person does. Hopefully they share a little bit. And then you deepen it and deepen it and deepen it to the point where 11 years later,
you get this.
You get this. And literally, this person is my sister. I mean, you are my soul sister. And I would I would step in front of a train for you. I would literally, I would step in front of a train.
Likewise.
So
Yeah. And to bring it full circle, then I think, if I'm going through a pain or a struggle in my life, I can reach out to Julie and I can share kind of where I'm struggling or how I'm struggling, or, the insecurities that are coming up inside of me. And I can trust that that will be, held with a lot of tenderness and respect. And so what that does is it keeps me away from needing other coping skills, maybe something like food, right? But it also, sometimes I don't even need to necessarily in that moment reach out, because I can say, well, what would Julie say to me right now? How would our friendship support me? And so there's that intrapersonal healing too, that you kind of create this new template of like, her words start to replace old words. And so those become my words. And my words now are a lot kinder to that part of me that wonders if I have to have all the answers. So, just to kind of bring it full circle, that's how these vulnerable relationships then start to repair within and also in between each other.
Oh, so tender. I'll have to get back into my left brain. That was like really, my right brain is like just loving this. So what Dr. Ashley is talking about is internalizing, right? So we internalize the voices at the very beginning, and sometimes that can be difficult, right? Like, what's wrong with you? You're too sensitive, teased, those kinds of things. Then when you find a safe person that you've tested over time, and then they're in an active relationship with you, and you allow yourself to be open and vulnerable, and they say these kind words over and over again, then you internalize that, and then it becomes part of that voice that then helps repair, and it becomes part of then your own self-talk, right? And guess what? That's what starts to change that old template, okay? And you actually start hearing that positive voice much more than that negative voice. And the more healthy people and healthy experiences, and then add yourself to the mix, right? Because now you're giving yourself, you're like, that's okay. Like, I kind of sounded weird today, but that's all right. I still like who I am. Like, that's okay. Overall, I sound pretty intelligent.
What are they thinking of us? Oh my gosh.
So all of these kind of like positive voices, right, become then, what is just natural and automatically there. You don't even have to think about it anymore. And the sure as heck is no room then or need for food, okay? Over here, there's tons of need for food because we all need to feel comforted and loved and safe. And if we don't have healthy people and we don't have ourselves inside, we're going to find something that makes us feel comforted. And food very early on became that, those wonderful sweet carbohydrates that increase our serotonin. I mean, there's all these chemical things that food does that gives us that positive.
Absolutely.
When we're doing what we're talking about, allowing other people, those reparative relationships to come in, internalize it, develop it within yourself, there just isn't need for food in that way. Like apple pie can be apple pie because it tastes good. Apple pie is not like, oh my gosh, I'm hurting. Where's the apple pie?
Well, it's no longer the best friend and the confidant and the lover.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Or the nurturing mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So this is how.
This is the deeper work.
This is the deeper work. Okay. So we started out with this really important conversation about vulnerability, because you can't really get to the deeper work without risking to move through the fear of vulnerability. And please hear over and over again that word emphasized fear, because you're always going to have some fear of vulnerability. Okay.
That's what makes it vulnerable.
That's what makes it vulnerable, right? But hopefully you're going to have enough experiences that say, hey, when I risk, it turns out okay. And when it doesn't turn out okay, it's because that person was a jerk or whatever, right? So we want you to walk through that fear of vulnerability. You're already doing a great job because you're here, right? You're interacting with each other. You're going into a journey within yourself. And all of this is vulnerable. Yeah. Because you're hoping to find not a re-wounding, but a repair. Okay? And that's what this education is all about.
Yes. And I just want to acknowledge we have a beautiful comment by telling other people just this past week was a step for me.
Oh.
People have reached out to me and shared their story, and it helped me to realize I'm not the only one out there. So
Bingo.
That's exactly what we're talking about, right? Learning we're not alone. There's nothing wrong with us for what we're feeling and thinking, and that all parts of us are okay to bring forward. So
Absolutely.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this helpful. We look forward to comments and questions and more interesting, conversations about all of this.
Yeah.
So we'll continue to bring our real selves to the table.
Yeah. And thank you for bringing yours.
Yes.
Take care. We'll see you next time.
Bye.